And I think so many other Amazon sellers who are trying to navigate these choppy waters and just see what type of hard decisions do we need to make over the next 6 to 12 months. And we're back with the Amazing Freedom Podcast. My name is Nate Slamans, joined by Andy Slamans and Abs today to talk about what we're doing this week and every week in our Amazon business. A couple weeks ago, we had probably our most popular podcast of the year so far, where we talked about 10 ways to make millions of dollars on Amazon during a shaky economy or during a recession. And we want to kind of make a part two continuation of that because I think it is such an important topic. And literally, even right before we hopped on here, the three of us together, we are talking about these things, trying to make these decisions in our own Amazon business. So it's just really relevant to us. And I think so many other Amazon sellers who are trying to navigate these choppy waters and just see what type of hard decisions do we need to make over the next 6 to 12 months to make sure that we are mitigating our down risks and maximizing our upside, right? And so we don't want this to just be about the downside. We definitely want to always focus on the upside because, we still think there is unlimited opportunity selling on Amazon, but you have to be smart. And I think we said it a couple of weeks ago. Our opinion is we're probably going to see some people get weeded out of the Amazon environment who were operating maybe a little haphazardly or bringing in the classic barbecue gloves or what have you, right? Stuff that we've been talking about here for years. So today we want to talk about how we plan to make $5 million or sell $5 million in a recession over the next 6 months. We still are heading towards our $10 million challenge. We talked about that all last week, where we're at. I encourage you to go listen to last week's episode if you haven't, how we still plan on hitting our $10 million challenge on Amazon and the steps we're looking to take in order to do that. But today, we're going to focus on, again, maybe a little bit more of mitigating the down risk and some of the proactive changes or maybe updates that we're making in our business. So, Andy, one of the things we talked about last year a lot was the high cost of importing containers to the U.S. that we've just never seen before, right? You've been, when did you import your first container to, like, way back when you first started selling?
Yeah, that was 2014. And I believe the container cost was right around $2,500 or $2,600.
Oh my goodness, makes me sick to hear that even. So $2,600. And last Q4, we were paying $25,000. So a 10X over your first container 7 and 8 years ago, whatever that was, right? So that alone had me pretty scared last year. I know I was telling you guys, I was kind of chirping a lot at us saying like, hey, we need to be careful. And here's kind of my thing, and that we're going to continue to look at is when your COGS go up that high, when your shipping costs do double, triple, quadruple, or 5X, whatever, your inventory just gets a lot more expensive, right? And I know we all know that at a face value, but my fear last year, and thankfully, there's always this balancing act where Andy, you might push a little bit more and say like, no, we gotta keep doing it, and I think it helps balance us out. But my fear was that we would accumulate too much inventory heading into 2022, and then shipping prices would drop. And then we would be stuck with very expensive inventory that costs a lot to ship in, where our competitors might be bringing in cheaper inventory, right? And that's kind of the fear that I had last year. Now, thankfully, so far this year, our stuff has sold very well. And we actually, once again, in April, May, ran into some stock issues, not as bad as 2020 or 2021, but we still got, basically, we sold down most of that inventory. Now, not all of it, because I will say this, we still do. It's not all rosy. We do still have some SKUs that we brought in last year that aren't maybe our best sellers, that are probably a little expensive now because shipping has gone down. I actually don't monitor shipping all the time. We have our supply chain and our operations, so I'm not looking at every day. But I think, Andy, you said our last quote you saw was like around the 15,000 mark, right?
Yep.
And obviously it depends if you're where you're importing to, east, west. We do a lot of stuff to the East Coast just because our warehouse there. So it changes compared to maybe some LA shipping, but that's still something we're looking at. So I would say I've seen some people, actually was just reading a thread recently where someone did fall into this scenario that we were afraid about last year, and they brought in too much inventory last year at a high cost, and they've basically spent the last 6 months trying to sell through this expensive inventory at a net profit loss. Now they're getting cash flow back because they are selling through inventory that they put money into, right? Like, so they need to sell this stuff, but they're selling it at a loss. And essentially it's kind of like a lost year for them. And so what we're trying to do, I would say, is just be very careful. We're looking at out the next 6 to 9 months where we need to make a lot of inventory buying decisions, and containers have come down versus last year. But my question is, what if shipping continues to decline? Now, I don't see it like dramatically declining anytime soon, but if other people, like I'm hearing in the news recently that Walmart and Target are starting to get a lot of inventory built up, right? And we know that these major retail players drive shipping containers way more than any small Amazon store does, right? I'm like Walmart, and then think about like Amazon themselves, all the stuff they buy. I mean, they're driving shipping supply chain issues way more than we are. And so just looking at them, if their supply is getting built up, maybe they aren't ordering quite as much inventory in Q4 this year as they did last year. What does that do to shipping prices? I actually don't know. Like I'm not an economist when it comes to this, and it's hard to predict. But for sure, I don't know if I see shipping prices really going back up too much more, since we're kind of at historically high prices. So we're looking at that, I feel like, and we're saying, hey, what can we do over to kind of get back to just being a little bit lean, not crazy lean, but not building up too much inventory, and especially that expensive inventory. So, I mean, that's hard, Andy. How do you think about that? Because it's hard to say, because it's like this constant pull of, I mean, you risk going out of stock, right? That's been our issue the last 2 years. So what's your thought as you kind of think about that heading towards the next 6 months of ordering?
Yeah, I think this entire conversation is fascinating because it's something that we really haven't had to think about. And probably it's something that a lot of businesses have not had to think about the previous 10 years, right? Because we've really been in a bull market over the last 2 years. I think a lot of PPP money has really propped up a lot of businesses that may have actually gone out of business had that PP loan money not propped them up at that time. And so, these thoughts and conversations that we're having in this internal, dialogue that we're having, the three of us, is, to me, it's almost like new territory. And so I think, one of the purposes of why we're sharing this is, if you haven't had these thoughts, you need to stop and pause and think about. We don't know. It's hard to predict what consumer behavior is going to be. And so, as a company, we are on track, right, to hit our 10 million this year. However, it's hard to predict what consumer behavior is going to be right in 2023. It may not have hit consumers yet, although I do think that it's beginning to. But the recession is just starting. What's it going to feel like to those consumers, in January, February, March, April, May of 2023? It may be a little different where they pull that back. And then as a business, right, when we're forecasting, where, typically we've always forecasted, hey, our growth is, we're going to need to order 10% more products. Where now we're looking at, and you're trying to guess, and that's never a good strategy, but you do have to take that in consideration. You're trying to guess, look, what potentially could consumer habits be? Because like you said, you don't want to get stuck with a lot of dead inventory, because that could dramatically hurt your business if you're carrying, right, millions of dollars of inventory for a lengthy amount of time.
So to sum up this kind of point number one of what we're doing is, first of all, if you're not already, every month, we actually have our call tomorrow as we speak right now. We're forecasting out our inventory, right? So every single month we get together, like our inventory team and management team, and we forecast our inventory out. And if you're not doing that right now, even if it's just you and your team, I encourage you to do that regularly. If you don't have that many SKUs, then do it weekly. If you have a lot of SKUs like we do, and kind of a little bit more structure in place, monthly at a minimum, forecasting out. And then it kind of comes down to risk tolerance, I think, is what you're kind of saying there, Andy, right? Like, do you want to be aggressive and just say, yes, we're definitely going to grow at 10%? Or would you say, hey, if sales decline by 10%, what would that look like? And maybe you have those kind of models built out. I know bigger companies, do all kind of forecasting models, and they'll have 20 different models sometimes that are like, here's 100% growth, here's 50% decline, and you basically have to pick something based on a risk tolerance in between and make an educated guess at the end of the day. If you're forecasting really aggressively, but then you realize what that means if things decline and you can't stomach that drop, that's like, you just know your temperance is not to be able to stomach that. Like that might be where you're like, okay, I might lose on some of the upside, but I'm avoiding disaster scenario, right? And that's where I think you have to come to somewhere that makes sense for you. All right, so number 2 that we're doing is we're looking at our cash flow closer than ever, and we're trying to minimize our burn rate. So Abs, I want to go to you because I know you follow like the Silicon Valley tech scene very closely. I know you kind of stay on top of all things crypto and Web3 and all that, which obviously has been a little bit shaky. And so I think those guys are a little bit ahead of the curve on where we could be heading, right? So what are you hearing in that market, and what does that kind of make you think as far as just looking at our company's cash flow and burn rate?
Right. Well, I think the good news is we don't have outside investment. We don't have any major loans, which is a different conversation for Silicon Valley type of business. Actually, if we're in Silicon Valley, we would not be considered a Silicon Valley business because you need to have capital to scale the way they like to. However, I think the major echo we've been hearing lately is bond multiples and run rate, and making sure you have enough cash flow or capital to last you the next at least 36 months, which is crazy because a lot of businesses are still operating like it's business as usual. But the really smart guys in the investment community are saying you need to have at least 36 months of cash flow to survive. We some of the guys we listened to, we saw a business that was valued at $700+ million run out of business because they didn't have enough money to pay their employees and to cover their expenses. And so from the Silicon Valley space, it's enough money to survive this next phase of where the economy is going to. We're not 100% sure what it's going to look like, but you need to have enough money to survive. And for businesses like ours that, we're cash flow positive, we're looking at that beyond just, having enough money in the bank, but do we have enough money to project our sort of growth without, going out of cash, basically. So for the next 6 months, we say we want to do $5+ million. What does that mean for us in terms of OPEX costs, in terms of advertising costs? And just to go back to something you said about on the first point, about watching our inventories and our shipping. One thing we've done, and I think we're continuing to do, is if we spend more on shipping, what does that mean for our end customers? And something we did, I just want to throw it out there to anybody listening, is when you spend more on shipping, it definitely affects your margins. That it definitely affects your profitability. It definitely affects your cash flow. And so you need to figure out how do you make up for that, without pushing away more customers. That's going to change how you acquire customers, how much you spend on a customer acquisition. If you're spending $10 to acquire a customer and now your shipping is more expensive, you may probably need to consider how you could reduce that from 10 to a 9 point something. If you were, getting a customer to buy just one product from your store, how could you upsell them to something else to make up for, the more money you have to spend in inventory? And so that's also how we look at cash flow. How are we preparing for the future growth? How are we making sure we have enough to survive today? And how do we make sure that, we don't run out of what to sell and go out of stock?
Yeah, there was a lot there. And maybe just break down. I want to break down when you say, the 36 months of cash flow. You're right. We've never gotten into debt for this particular brand that we're often talking about, which is probably, again, is maybe a conservative move that maybe hampered our growth in the past. But at times like this, we're thankful that reduces the need to look at, what that would look like there. But for someone who is, operating on some kind of loan and typically there's a turnover to that regularly, what you're seeing is that, 36 months, is that then looking at not being able to get new money into the business potentially for a while? Is that how you would think of this?
Exactly. And this is for those guys that, have a lot of outside investment, just knowing that you would not be able to have VCs cut you a check for the next 36 months. You need to have enough money to keep your team together, to keep growing. and to keep expanding your product. That's what it basically means, because everybody's trying to figure out, what do we do? How do we reallocate our budget? How do we stay profitable? And so businesses have to be able to survive at least the next 36 months. And that also means, unfortunately, for some of them, it's how do you reduce team headcount? How do you reduce unnecessary expenses to survive that? And for some of the really smart VCs, they're encouraging their companies right now that they've invested in, if you have to let go of some certain marketing expenses, some certain headcounts, some certain extracurricular activities you do with your team members, like going on Coachella and things like that with the entire team, cut those off so you could survive the next 36 months and be able to then raise more money after we get out of where we are.
Yeah, we have never had the ping pong table or pool table in the lobby since we operate virtually. So that right now we don't have to do. But like every company, we do build up a certain layer of extra expenses that I think you can always go and look at and see is this truly necessary. So we're looking at our shipping, number one. We're looking at our cash flow and our burn rate, and then number three we have here is we're looking at our freelancers and our extra services. So you kind of already touched on that, Abs. And I mean, Andy, this is a tough one. You worked at a big company for a long time, large corporation essentially. And I think you were there during kind of the '08 downturn. Again, not saying that that's on the horizon or anything for sure, but was there any changes that you saw there? I'm just prompting this, so maybe there wasn't, but was there anything there that like that company made decisions to like cut stuff and, or if you want to just give your experience from the broader market of that time period, what you saw?
Yeah, again, I think, for folks that have been in business for any amount of time and went through that downturn, I'm sure that they could relate with examples of things that their businesses did. Yes, so that company that I worked for, I'll give you one very good example. During that time, so it's run actually off of a trust, and at the time, prior to the downturn in the economy, it was like at 15 billion or something, right? And then the downturn hits and it goes down to like 12 billion. So, the company I work for, they basically run off the interest. Well, when that happens, then, the company has to look at ways, what are they going to do differently to cut costs? So one of the things they did, they own a lot of land. So it's a school. And so what they did is they looked at their lawn contract, and so they were paying this company like $2 or $3 million a year, to manicure and mow all of this acreage. It was beautiful. And they did an amazing job. But what they said is, well, hey, look, this is kind of for aesthetics. How can we cut down and not mow as much? And what we'll do is we'll tell the people this is actually going to be better for the environment, for the lawn, especially when it comes to rain waters and flooding, because if we let the grass grow up in these areas, they're going to be able to absorb a lot more of the rainwater. And so it went from this beautiful campus, like nothing you had ever seen before, it was so well manicured, to now you had all of these different areas where they basically just let wild plants grow. And so you'd be driving through and looking like, oh man, like what in the world happened? Well, I can tell you what happened. There was budget cuts and they had to save money on what they were paying for that lawn company. And so that's, I think, a lot of decisions, right, that companies have to make when they hit those downturns and when they hit recessions.
That was a good example. I wasn't expecting that good of an example. And yeah, what you're saying is the world looks a little uglier in a downturn potentially.
Well, that was the complaint across the board. No one complained when it looks beautiful, but then as soon as it changes, they're like, oh man.
So I'm assuming they went back to a kind of happy medium once things started picking back up.
No, that's what's interesting is they've actually kept it the same. And so, and that's probably a decision a lot of companies have to face as well when they do make those cuts, right? When it comes back around, when things come up, do they say, look, is this necessary? Can we live with it?
And that's the big unknown and hard stuff, right? There's entire businesses and industries that, if we do go through some kind of shakeup, might look completely different when people say, when people decide like, hey, this was a luxury that I never truly needed, right? I always look at these buy now, pay later services like the Affirms and what's some other ones? I forget what those are. And we use these too on our Shopify site, right? But I've always looked at these last couple of years and I'm like, man, everybody's getting used to buying now and paying later. And at some point that could look kind of weird, or the government might come in and regulate that a little bit more if consumer debt piles up too high because of basically it's like having a loan on everything, right? Your shirt and your shoes and everything that you buy. So those are the types of things that could just look different. And I'm just throwing something out there. It could just be the manicured lawn or whatever, or the some service that you're used to that doesn't get there. So we're looking at those in our business. We don't have any grass we're cutting right now that we're going to cut out, but there are other services that we currently use that we'll just be evaluating and seeing. Can we just run, a little bit closer, make sure that our margins are at a healthy amount. All right. So number 4, kind of along those lines, but probably what we consider a more necessary expense every month would be our advertising. So we talk about our advertising all the time. If you follow our $10 million challenge, if you're signed up to be an insider, which you can do at amazingfreedom.com, you'll hear all about where we're at with our challenge. You'll get our monthly magazine. You'll get our newsletter every week. So it's free. Go sign up to be an insider. But if you're following that blog, I mean, a lot of the blog that we're doing every month in our updates talks about our PPC because it is so critical to not only our business, but I think most Amazon sellers right now, PPC is there. We saw a huge increase over the past 2 years to Amazon costs, right? From 2019 to 2022, it looks completely different. There's just more sellers. It's more aggressive. But I think we're finally saying, if you follow our blog, you'll have seen us say this. We kind of said enough is enough back in, I want to say March, April. We were spending too much. Our tacos kind of crept up too high. And we're cutting that back a little bit. We're just setting our targets a little bit lower. Both on and off Amazon with advertising. What does that mean? Does that mean that we grow a little bit slower, potentially from a revenue standpoint? We probably are reducing our growth a little bit, but it's kind of like, revenue is a vanity metric. What's the saying, the vanity saying there, that revenue is vanity? And so we say that all the time, right? That revenue is vanity and profit is sanity. And so we're reducing our tacos down a couple percentage points. And off Amazon, we got too aggressive in Q4 last year with our off Amazon. Facebook ads just kind of look so different than they did before. We're just playing that a little bit closer. So Abs, you look at this spend all the time. Maybe just 1 or 2 things that you're seeing on the marketing side of advertising that you're just looking at for the next 6 months.
Oh, I think we talked about this a lot. We are changing how we look at our top of funnel customer acquisition. That's what it is. In the past, we use ads to capture top of funnel, to do remarketing and everything. But now we're saying as a business that wants to be smarter and want to focus more on profit, is how do we capture attention without having to spend so much to capture the attention and just spend on retargeting. So all our off Amazon marketing is basically just retargeting. And so we use our social media, we use content to create as our top of funnel awareness and lead capture, and then just retarget with ads. And so that reduces the amount of ads you have to spend, obviously, and we stay profitable. And then on the Amazon side, where tacos has been one of those things we have been tracking really hard this year. We've tried to really manage that down. And so what we're looking at on Amazon is are there products that we could drive more off Amazon traffic to help conversions better, that we could help, we could reduce spend and maybe reduce our tacos on them, because a lot more traffic is being sent to them. It's telling Amazon people like this product, and so we're performing better there. So those are like the things we're doing. And then it's something anybody listening to this could really do, right? It's do more non-ad related stuff. It's a social media with the kind of content to create, because it allows you to spend less on the ad side. It allows your ad to be even more effective on any platform, even on Facebook. If Facebook sees that people are interacting more with your ads, with your content, your ad gets cheaper. Unlike a drop shipping brand, or same thing on Amazon. If Amazon sees that people are coming from YouTube, from Facebook, from Instagram to this particular product, and they are either adding to cart and stuff, your ads will get cheaper. And so that's how we're looking at it. Top of funnel with more content and more branding and more marketing related stuff, and then just retarget more with ads, reduce the spend, stay profitable, and that's, I think, our strategy as it is right now.
Yeah, I love it. So we said, number 1, we're watching our inventory levels and our shipping costs. Number 2, we're looking at our cash flow. Number 3, we're looking at if there's some extra services, freelancers, headcount that we can, just make sure we're operating efficiently on. And number 4, we're, paring down our advertising and trying to be smarter with our advertising. And at the risk of this podcast sounding too doom and gloom and negative, and Andy, I think you'll like this. Number 5 is really, so the 5th thing we're trying to do to make $5 million over the next 6 months, or sell $5 million in recession or in beyond, is we're trying to keep our eye on opportunities. And there's kind of two mindsets you can have about this. It's like, that negative mindset, or Andy, I think the mindset that you typically have whenever we start talking about this is you're like, well, we just got to find ways to make more money, right? It's basically how do we work harder, smarter, and find ways to make money. And if you actually look at some of the stuff that we already said, if your competitors did bring in too much inventory at a high cost, and you can now enter the market at a lower cost, I mean, you're going to come in with an advantage. If other companies are operating at this high burn rate where they're about to blow up in 6 to 12 months, some of these maybe aggregators that aren't, they're kind of depressing the market right now and increasing PPC costs, the chances are that they might run into a brick wall eventually and you can come in. So if you feel like it's been hard to enter some markets because the market is hot right now, usually when you have a little bit of a reset or things change, that's the best time to come into a new niche or a new opportunity. And maybe you're just doing what Abs was just talking about, and you're just building that audience. You're working your social media. You're gaining followers around a niche topic. We spent a couple months earlier this year talking about what we would do to find new products, and a lot of that time we talked about building an audience and spending time around something we're passionate about. Do that now, when other companies are potentially going to run into some issues soon. And then when they do, that's when you introduce your product and you capitalize on it. And so again, we are still introducing new products. Despite all of this, we're bringing in new stuff, and we're trying to stay aggressive with it. And I'll give it to you in a second on just what you see as being like potential opportunities or how you view that. But I wanted to real quick say, I just finished a biography on Warren Buffett. It was really long, a snowball. And it's so interesting to look at a 70-year career of someone like him, right? And there's the times he made the most money were in all the downturns, right? And we know that, but in the 70s, that's when he made his money. He came in and he bought companies on the cheap and he looked for those opportunities. And he basically just stayed consistently focused. He was smart with his business principles. He's always been kind of conservative and frugal, and he never got showy at any point when he went in and he basically bought a good portion of Salomon Brothers, which was like a Wall Street, like the pinnacle of like fluffy perks. And they had like a private chef for every employee almost type thing, and haircuts, right? Like he came in and it kind of made him sick. And those are the businesses that he was able to eke a lot out of because he came in and he operated them smarter than other people are willing to. So I think that's what we're trying to get across is how can you operate smart when other people are going to just put the blinders on and not be willing to make some of the tough decisions. And look, and I mean, this week's hard, right? Like maybe just talk about some of the hard decisions that you're basically trying to, and I guess the mindset you have when you're trying to make tough decisions, when you're trying to make sure that we're not being too risky.
Yeah, well, I think you have to keep the mindset, like you just said. We've gone through many recessions. Every economy has, and during those recessions, if people dig into history, like you just referred to, you will see that there are many companies born during those recessions and became profitable. Right? How do they do it? They make good business decisions. We're in a physical product business. That's the business we're in. And so even during a recession, people still purchase products, right? They may purchase them at a slower rate, and it may be a different product mix that they purchase, but they are still buying products. They're still buying services. Look, over the wintertime, if our economy still continues to go down, it's going to snow. There's going to be salt on the road, and my local car wash is still going to be backed up. People want that salt washed off of their cars. And so they're going to be paying money just like they did right prior to the recession. But as a business and as a physical product business, like you just referred to, we need to be smart and source products that are going to sell. So now, whereas before during the bull market, you could maybe take more risk on potential products, now we have to be very precise and have good targeting at those new products that we bring in. We want to bring in products that we're very confident, right, that they're going to sell. And that's how we can grow our business. And that's really, I think, that separates a A+ business from a D- business. And we've shared this before. There probably were a lot of folks over the last 7 or 8 years that have had a lot of success in business because it was easy. And now it may be a little more difficult. And so you might see some of those entrepreneurs go away if they haven't learned, right, how to become really good business people.
Well, hopefully that's not us. Hopefully we haven't just been getting lucky. And these are 5 things we're personally trying to do. So take it for what applies to you and what might not apply to you. Everyone's business is different, but at the end of the day, we're trying to operate smart and we're trying to think long term, not just for kind of what's going to be the short term outcome, but what's going to keep us as a business thriving. And we've actually said this a lot. We think that the brand we're building could be a brand in 50 years, right? And that's kind of weird to think about because the brand could outlive us in some ways. And so we're trying to keep that long term perspective there. What tough decisions do we need to make today to make sure that this brand is successful 50 years from now or whatever, right? So
real quick, let me just add, it's a fascinating read. Folks that are listening, I highly encourage you can Google it. I just read she was the first female, she's the wealthiest self-made female billionaire in America. She started a business in the late 1970s called ABC Supply. So it's a business that like supplies construction materials, privately owned. I believe in the article I read, it's the 23rd largest private business in America right now, solely owned by her. She lives in a small town in Wisconsin. And, again, she has gone through how many downturns in economies, and her business is thriving better than ever. And so, we just have to be smart and ride those waves, similar to what she has. But I encourage you to Google it again. Her company's name is ABC Supply. It's a fascinating article.
All right, so we'll look it up and maybe we'll have some lessons we take away from that next week. So, all right, go sign up to be an insider if you haven't yet at amazingfreedom.com, and we'll catch you on the next episode of the Amazing Freedom Podcast. See ya.